I always believed blood was thicker than water, but that belief died the night I saw my daughter's silver Civic crumpled against a guardrail. It took me 3 years of double shifts to save $15,000 for that car, and it took my brother less than 30 minutes to destroy it. Yet the real shock wasn't the wreckage. It was hearing my father look a police officer in the eye and demand he arrest his own son. The glowing numbers on the corner of my laptop screen read 11:42 at night. But my day was far from over. My eyes burned from 6 straight hours of staring at spreadsheets for Harborview medical billing, cross-referencing patient copays against insurance denials. The duplex was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator that I prayed would last another 6 months and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the radiator. This was my life at 32. I was a professional navigator of thin margins, a single mother who had turned stretching $1 into an Olympic sport. I stretched my arms over my head, hearing the pop of my spine, and looked around the living room. It was modest. The furniture was a mix of thrift store finds I had reupholstered myself and IKEA pieces that had survived 3 moves. But it was clean, and it was ours, mine and Haley's. My 17-year-old daughter was asleep in the back room, or at least I hoped she was. She had an opening shift at the Grind, the local coffee shop where she had been working for the last 3 months, and she needed her rest. I stood up and walked to the front window. Peeling back the curtain just an inch, there it was, under the amber glow of the street lamp. Parked perfectly parallel to the curb, sat the silver 2014 Honda Civic. To anyone else in Ridgeview, it was just a used economy car with 80,000 miles on the odometer, a sensible commuter vehicle. But to me, looking at that silver paint gleaming under the streetlight, it was a trophy. It was $15,000 of blood, sweat, and deferred gratification. I had spent 4 years crawling out of the debt left behind when Haley's father decided fatherhood was an optional hobby rather than a lifetime commitment. I picked up extra shifts, I skipped lunches, I wore the same winter coat for 5 years, and then there was the final piece of the puzzle, Grandma Nora. When my grandmother passed, she left a small inheritance account that my father, Mark, administered. It was specifically earmarked for the grandchildren, intended for education or a great start in life. $5,000. It wasn't a fortune, but combined with the $10,000 I had scraped together, it bought freedom. It bought Haley a safe way to get to her classes at the high school and her job at the cafe. It meant she didn't have to wait for the bus in the freezing rain like I did at her age. I let the curtain fall back into place. That car was proof that we were making it. We were building a life that relied on no one but us. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating against the wood. I glanced at the screen. Mom, don't forget dinner tomorrow at 5. Ryan is making his famous garlic bread. I felt a familiar knot of tension tighten in my stomach. My mother, Linda, treated Sunday dinners like mandatory court appearances, and the mention of Ryan, my 29-year-old brother, usually meant one of 2 things. He needed money, or he needed a favor. Ryan was the family paradox. He was charming, handsome in a rugged way that made people forgive him too easily, and utterly incapable of getting his life together. He was currently living in my parents' guest room on Maple Crest Lane, ostensibly saving money after losing his job at a landscaping company. The official story was a layoff due to seasonal downsizing. The truth, which I had heard through the Ridgeview grapevine, involved a heated argument with a foreman and a leaf blower thrown across a yard. I typed back, "We'll be there, bringing salad." I didn't mention that I was dreading it. I didn't mention that every time I saw Ryan, I felt the weight of the double standard that had defined our childhoods. I was the responsible one, the one who fixed things. Ryan was the golden boy who broke things. And my parents were the cleanup crew. The next afternoon, the sky over Ridgeview was a bruised purple, threatening rain. I sat in the passenger seat of the Civic while Haley drove. She was a careful driver, 2 hands on the wheel, checking her mirrors with the diligence of someone who knew exactly how much this machine cost. "You are doing great," I said, watching her brake smoothly for a stop sign. She smiled. A quick flash of braces she was due to get off next month. I love this car. Mom, she said, her voice soft. It drives so smooth. Thank you. I know you worked really hard for it. We are a team, I said, reaching over to squeeze her shoulder. Grandma Nora helped too. Don't forget that. I know, she said. I wish she could see it. As we turned onto Maple Crest Lane, the anxiety returned. My parents' house was a neat, ranch-style home with manicured hedges and a freshly painted mailbox. It looked like the American dream, provided you didn't look too closely at the cracks in the driveway or the way my father's shoulders slumped when he thought no one was watching. Park it close to the curb, I said, my voice sharper than I intended, and fold the mirrors in. Haley obeyed instantly, guiding the car into a spot well away from the driveway where Ryan's massive, rusted pickup truck was parked at a crooked angle. The truck was a beast of a vehicle, lifted too high, with a muffler that sounded like gunfire and a bed full of empty energy drink cans. Lock it, I said as we got out. Then I paused. Lock it twice. I want to hear the horn beep. Mom, it is locked. Haley laughed, pressing the fob. The car chirped once, twice, hails, humor me. She pressed it again. The car honked a short, affirmative blast. It wasn't that I thought someone would steal it. It was that the car represented a fragile victory, and I was terrified of anything scratching the paint. We walked up the driveway. The front door opened before we even knocked, and there was my mother, Linda, wearing her apron and a strained smile. "There are my girls," she cried, pulling Haley into a hug that smelled of pot roast and heavy perfume. Come in. Come in. Ryan is just finishing up the bread." We stepped inside. The house was warm. Too warm. The thermostat cranked up to combat the Midwestern chill. My father, Mark, was sitting in his recliner in the living room, watching golf with the volume low. He looked up and gave me a tired smile. "Hi, Chloe," he said. "Hi, Dad." "How is the hip?" "It is behaving today," he said, though I watched him wince as he shifted his weight. Then Ryan walked in from the kitchen. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt and jeans that looked expensive despite the holes in the knees. He had a dish rag thrown over his shoulder and a grin that usually got him out of speeding tickets. "Well, look at the ladies," Ryan boomed. "Haley, I saw you pull up. That is a sweet ride for a teenager, a little fancy for a cafe worker." "Is it not?" He winked, but the comment landed with a thud in my chest. "It is a safe car." "Ryan," I said, keeping my voice even, "and she pays for her own gas and insurance." Ryan laughed, waving a hand dismissively. "I am just messing with you. Chloe, you are always so serious. Relax. It is Sunday." We moved to the dining room table. The spread was impressive. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, and Ryan's garlic bread, which was admittedly delicious, but the air was thick with unspoken things. I focused on cutting my meat, listening to my mother chatter about the neighbor's new fence and the price of tomatoes. "So," Ryan said, abandoning his fork and leaning back in his chair. He gestured toward the window, where the silver roof of the Civic was visible. "My truck is sounding like a dying lawnmower today. Think the alternator is shot again." My father sighed. A short, sharp sound. "You just replaced the alternator last year." Ryan, "Yeah, well, I buy cheap parts because I'm broke." "Dad," Ryan said, his tone sharpening, "not all of us have medical billing money stashed away." I froze. "I make $38,000 a year." "Ryan," I said quietly, "I am hardly swimming in cash." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Point is, I need to run to the auto parts store before they close at 6. They have the part on hold for me, but if I drive the truck, I might not make it back. It is stalling out at every light." He looked at Haley, then at me. "Let me take the Civic," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with the casual entitlement of someone who had never been told no. "Absolutely not." I said. The table went silent. Haley looked down at her plate. "Come on." "Chloe," Ryan said, his smile tight, "it is literally 5 miles. Round trip. I just need to grab the part and come back. I want to show my buddy the car anyway. He is working the counter. He does not believe you bought a kid a $15,000 car. It is my car. Actually, I said, Haley is the primary driver, and the answer is no. Why? Ryan demanded, his voice rising. Because. Ryan, you have 3 speeding tickets in the last 2 years. You have a suspended registration on your truck because you didn't pay the fees, and because nobody drives that car but me and Haley. Linda set her fork down with a clatter. Chloe, really, it is just a quick trip. Help your brother out. He's trying to fix his truck so he can look for work tomorrow. He is not looking for work on a Monday morning. Mom, I said, feeling the heat rise in my face, and I am not risking my insurance rates. Mark cleared his throat. He looked from me to Ryan, his face pained. Maybe you could drive him. Chloe? I looked at my father, disappointed. He was doing the thing he always did, trying to find the path of least resistance. I am not driving him. I said, we just got here. We are eating dinner. Fine, Ryan spat. Forget it. I guess I will just let the truck die and then I can't get to that interview on Tuesday. Hope you are happy. Princess. He glared at Haley when he said it. Haley shrank back, looking like she wanted to disappear. That was the trigger. I stood up. Do not call her that. Ryan threw his napkin on the table. You are raising a princess. Chloe. That is what she is. Driving a luxury car to high school while her uncle scraps for gas money. It is pathetic. Linda stood up too, rushing around the table to grab my arm. Chloe, kitchen, now. I let her pull me into the kitchen, away from Haley. The moment the swinging door closed, Linda turned on me, her eyes wet with angry tears. You have to stop making him feel small, she hissed. I am not making him feel small. Mom, I whispered furiously. He is 29 years old. He is bullying my daughter because he is jealous of a Honda Civic. Do you realize how insane that is? He is struggling. Chloe, Linda said, gripping my hands. He feels like a failure. He sees you with your steady job and your house and that shiny car, and it hurts him. Just throw him a bone. Let him take the car around the block. It will make him feel like you trust him, like he is part of the family. I looked through the gap in the door. Mark was sitting at the table, staring at his potatoes, saying nothing. Ryan was on his phone, aggressively texting someone. Haley was picking at her bread, looking miserable. Mom, I don't trust him. I said. Linda's face hardened. He is your brother. If you can't trust family, who can you trust? Please, Chloe. For me, I don't want a screaming match. Not tonight. I just want a nice dinner. She looked so old in that moment. Her desperation to keep the peace was a physical weight she carried on her shoulders. I looked back at Haley. If I said no, Ryan would sulk and snap for the next 2 hours, ruining the night for her. If I said yes, he would leave, and we could finish eating in peace. I took a deep breath, a breath that tasted of regret before I even exhaled. Fine, I said. I pushed back through the door. Ryan looked up, a smug expression already forming. You can take it, I said, my voice ice cold. But here are the conditions. You go straight to the parts store. You come straight back. No detours. No friends in the car. And if I smell even a hint of cigarette smoke in there, you will never sit in it again. Ryan jumped up, clapping his hands. You got it. Boss. Straight there. Straight back. I will treat it like a baby. 30 minutes. Ryan, I said, the store is 10 minutes away. That gives you 10 minutes to buy the part. If you are not back in 30 minutes, I am reporting it stolen. He laughed as if I were telling a hilarious joke. You are dramatic. Chloe, toss me the keys. I reached into my purse. The keys felt heavy, anchored to my hand. I didn't want to let go. My instincts were screaming at me, a siren in the back of my skull. Don't do it. Don't do it. But I looked at my mother's pleading face, and I tossed the keys. Ryan caught them one-handed. Thanks, sis. Back in a flash. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I followed him to the porch, watching as he unlocked the Civic. He adjusted the seat, moving it way back. He revved the engine once, something Haley never did, and then shifted into reverse. "Be careful!" I yelled. He waved a hand out the window, threw the car into drive, and peeled out. Tires chirped against the asphalt. He accelerated too fast down Maple Crest Lane, the engine whining in a way that made my stomach drop. I stood there until his taillights disappeared around the corner. The wind picked up, cold and damp. 30 minutes. I whispered to myself. I went back inside. Dinner resumed, but the taste was gone from the food. Mark asked Haley about school, about her grades. Linda talked about the church bake sale. I kept checking my watch. 6:15 passed. 6:20 passed. At 6:25, I texted Ryan. "Where are you?" No reply. At 6:30, the rain started. It began as a slow drizzle and quickly turned into a steady, drumming downpour that rattled the gutters. I stood up. "He is late. He is probably just stuck in line," Linda said, though she looked nervous. "You know how slow that store is on Sundays." I called his phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Hey, this is Ryan. Leave a message or don't." I hung up and called again. Voicemail. "Chloe, sit down," Mark said softly. "Pacing won't make him drive faster." "I can't sit down. Dad, he has had the car for 40 minutes. It is a 10-minute drive." At 6:45, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walked to the window. The street was empty, slick with rain, reflecting the yellow streetlights. "Something is wrong," I said. "I know it." "Oh, stop it," Linda said, her voice shrill. "He probably stopped to get gas, or maybe he saw a friend. He is fine. The car is fine." I turned to Haley. "Get your coat." "Mom?" Haley asked, her eyes wide. "We are walking. We are going to find him." Before Haley could stand, the room was illuminated by a flash of blue and red light sweeping across the front window. It wasn't the steady glow of a decoration. It was the strobe-like pulse of emergency lights. The silence in the living room was absolute. Then came the knock. 3 heavy, authoritative raps on the front door. My mother let out a small whimper. Mark stood up, his face draining of color. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The terrible calm of a nightmare finally realized. I opened the door. A police officer stood there, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He looked young, but his eyes were serious. "I am looking for the registered owner of a silver 2014 Honda Civic." He said, "That is me." I said, my voice sounded hollow, "Is my brother okay?" The officer nodded once. "Ryan Thompson? He is at the scene. He is physically uninjured, but there has been a crash." "A crash?" Linda screamed from behind me. "I need you to come with me." "Ma'am," the officer said to me, "the car is not drivable. It is just down on Old Quarry Road." We all went. We piled into Mark's sedan, leaving the officer to lead the way in his cruiser. The drive was less than 2 miles, but it felt like crossing a continent. No one spoke. The only sound was the swish of wipers and my mother's quiet sobbing in the back seat. We turned onto Old Quarry Road, a winding stretch that ran along the edge of the ravines. Up ahead, I saw the cluster of flares and flashing lights. Mark parked the car, and I opened the door before it had fully stopped. I ran into the rain. The first thing I saw was the guardrail. A 20-foot section of steel was twisted and sheared off its posts. And then I saw the Civic. It was nose down in the ditch. The front end accordion crushed all the way to the windshield. The hood was bent in half. The airbags hung like deflated white balloons from the dashboard. Steam hissed from the shattered radiator into the cold rain. The silver paint was scarred with mud and deep gouges. It was dead. My $15,000. Haley's freedom. Grandma Nora's legacy. It was just a heap of scrap metal. I stopped walking. I couldn't breathe. Ryan was standing by the trunk of a patrol car. A blanket draped over his shoulders. He was holding a bottle of water. He looked up as we approached. He didn't look remorseful. He looked annoyed. "I told you the road was slick," Ryan shouted over the rain as soon as he saw me. "That corner came out of nowhere. The tires on that thing are garbage." "Chloe!" I stared at him. I couldn't find the words. I wanted to scream, but my throat was closed tight. Linda ran to him. "Oh, my baby. Are you hurt? Did you hit your head?" "I am fine." "Mom," Ryan said, shrugging her off. "Just shook up. The cop is making a big deal out of it. It was just a skid." A second officer, older, with gray hair and a sergeant's stripes, walked over to us. He held a clipboard. "Are you the sister?" he asked me. I nodded. "He took the curve too fast," the sergeant said flatly. "Lost control. Crossed the center line. Took out the rail. We are lucky no one was coming the other way." I looked at the car again. One of the wheels had snapped off the axle and was lying 10 feet away in the grass. Mark walked past me. He didn't go to the car. He didn't go to Linda. He walked straight to Ryan. He stood 2 feet from his son. Rainwater dripped from Mark's nose. He looked at Ryan's eyes. Glassy, bloodshot, unfocused. "You have been drinking," Mark said. "It wasn't a question," Ryan scoffed. "I had 2 beers with lunch." "Dad, relax. I am sober." "It was the rain." Mark leaned in closer. He sniffed the air around Ryan. Then he turned around and looked at the sergeant. Mark's face was unreadable. It was a mask of stone. I had never seen him look like that. Usually, this was the part where Mark pulled out his checkbook. This was the part where he asked the officer if they could handle this civilly. This was the part where he called a tow truck friend to make it disappear. The sergeant looked at Mark. "Sir?" Mark pointed a shaking finger at Ryan. "He was driving," Mark said, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain and the idling engines. "He has been drinking. I can smell it on him." "Dad!" Ryan yelled, his eyes going wide. "Shut up." Mark didn't look at him. He kept his eyes locked on the sergeant. "You need to do what you have to do," Mark said clearly. "Do not let him walk away from this. Test him. Right now." Linda gasped. "Mark, what are you doing?" "He is your son. He is a danger," Mark said, his voice cracking. "And I am done." The sergeant nodded slowly. He signaled to the younger officer. Ryan started backing away. "Dad, you are crazy. You are going to ruin me. Chloe, tell him." I stood there, soaked to the bone, looking at the ruin of my daughter's future in the ditch. I looked at my father, who was standing tall for the first time in 20 years, though I could see his hands trembling by his sides. I didn't say a word. I just watched as the officer took Ryan's arm and led him toward the cruiser for a field sobriety test. For the first time in my life, the rain felt like it was washing something clean. But as I looked at the crumpled silver medal, I knew the cost of this cleanliness was going to be higher than any of us could pay. Monday morning broke over Ridgeview with a gray, relentless light that offered no comfort. It was the kind of morning where the sky looked like dirty dishwater, pressing down on the rooftops and matching the heaviness in my chest. I sat at my small kitchen table, a command center of disaster, surrounded by scraps of paper, insurance cards, and a lukewarm mug of instant coffee that I could not bring myself to finish. I had been on the phone since 8 o'clock. "Please hold." A recorded voice chirped for the 10th time in 20 minutes. "Your call is important to us." I rubbed my temples, trying to massage away the headache that had taken up permanent residence behind my eyes. I had already called my boss at Harborview Medical Billing. I had to beg for a personal day, my voice cracking as I explained a vague family emergency. She had granted it, but I could hear the hesitation, the silent calculation of how this would impact the weekly quota. In my world, a personal crisis was just an administrative inconvenience to someone else. Across the room, Haley sat curled in the corner of the beige sofa. She was still wearing her pajamas, her knees pulled up to her chest. Her phone was in her hand, but she wasn't scrolling TikTok or texting friends. She was looking at the photos I had taken the night before. The flashlit images of the Civic, the crumpled hood, the shattered glass, the way the front passenger wheel had been torn clean off, leaving the axle buried in the mud like a broken bone. She hadn't said a word in an hour. "Haley," I said softly, covering the mouthpiece of my phone. "You need to eat something. There is toast." "I am not hungry," she whispered, not looking up. I turned back to the phone as a human finally picked up. Harborline Auto Insurance, Claims Department, this is Brenda. Hi, Brenda, I said, forcing my voice into that polite, steady register that women are taught to use even when their world is burning down. My name is Chloe Thompson. I need to file a claim. Policy number 4492 Alpha. I spent the next 40 minutes repeating the same nightmare. Yes, the car was totaled. Yes, there was a police report. No, I was not driving. Yes, the driver was a relative. Yes, there was a police presence at the scene. When I hung up, I felt drained, as if the call had siphoned the marrow from my bones. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 11. A heavy knock at the door made me jump. Haley flinched, her eyes darting to the window. "It is probably Grandma," she said, her voice small. I walked to the door, steeling myself for Linda's hysteria. But when I opened it, it was my father standing on the concrete stoop. Mark looked like he had aged 10 years in a single night. His usually neat silver hair was uncombed, sticking up in tufts. He wore yesterday's flannel shirt, rumpled and stained with rain. In his hands, he held a cardboard tray with 2 large black coffees and a thick manila envelope. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was gravel. "Of course, Dad." He stepped inside, the smell of rain and old tobacco clinging to him. He set the coffees on the table and looked at Haley. "Hi, sweetie," he said. Haley looked at him, her eyes filling with fresh tears. She didn't answer. She just buried her face in her knees. Mark flinched as if she had slapped him. He turned to me, handing me the envelope. "Here are copies of the arrest report," he said, "and the towing information. The car is at Miller's impound lot." I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like a brick. "Where is Ryan?" I asked. "Is he at Mom's?" Mark shook his head slowly. He sat down at the table, slumping into the chair. "No, he is at the county lockup." I stared at him. The coffee in my hand sloshed over the rim, burning my thumb. "What?" I asked. "You didn't bail him out?" Mark and Linda had spent my entire life being the safety net for Ryan's high-wire act, when he got caught shoplifting at 15. They smoothed it over with the store manager. When he got evicted at 22, they paid the landlord. When he got his first DUI at 25, the one he swore was a misunderstanding, they paid the lawyer and the fine before I even knew it had happened. I refused. Mark said. He took a sip of black coffee, his hand trembling slightly. The bail bondsman called me at 3 a.m. Linda was screaming at me to give him the credit card number. I told him no. "Why?" I asked, sinking into the chair opposite him. "Because." "Chloe," Mark said, looking me dead in the eye. "If I brought him home last night, he would have slept in his warm bed. He would have woken up to your mother making him pancakes. He would have convinced himself by noon that the crash was the car's fault, or the rain's fault, or your fault for stressing him out." Mark ran a hand over his face, rubbing the gray stubble on his chin. "I needed him to wake up on a concrete bench," Mark said. "I needed him to smell the vomit and the bleach. I needed him to sit there and realize that I'm not coming." I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a cold, hard logic that I had never heard from my father before. "How is Mom handling that?" I asked. Mark let out a dry, humorless laugh. "She isn't. She took the spare keys to the sedan about an hour ago. She is going down there to post bail herself. She says I have abandoned my family." I looked at the envelope in my hand. "You haven't abandoned us, Dad. You just stop the bleeding." "I don't know. Chloe," he whispered. "I don't know what I did, but I know I couldn't look at that car in the ditch and then drive him to a drive-thru." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock. Then Mark stood up. "I have to go back," he said. "I need to be there when she brings him home." "It is going to be loud. I will come with you." I said, "No, you don't have to." I stood up. I need to get Haley's spare house key from Mom's anyway, and I want to hear what he has to say. We drove over in my father's car. The silence in the vehicle was thick. When we pulled into the driveway on Maple Crest Lane, Ryan's truck was still there, a rusting monument to his failures. But the sedan was back, parked haphazardly, one wheel on the grass. We walked into the house, and the wall of sound hit us immediately. "You are a monster!" Linda's voice shrieked from the kitchen. "A monster! Mark!" He was freezing. He was hungry. We stepped into the kitchen. Ryan was sitting at the table, hunched over a plate of scrambled eggs. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot, and he smelled of stale sweat and institutional disinfectant. Linda was standing over him, buttering toast with aggressive, violent swipes of a knife. She spun around when we entered. Her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy. "Oh, look who it is," she spat. "The judge and the jury." "Mom, stop," I said, stepping forward. "Don't you tell me to stop." "Chloe," Linda yelled, pointing the butter knife at me. "Your brother spent the night in a cage because of you, because you had to call the police." "I didn't call the police," I shouted back, my own temper finally snapping. "A witness called the police. Ryan crashed my car into a guardrail. He made a mistake," Linda screamed. "He is your brother." "And your father stood there." She turned her fury on Mark. "He stood there and told them to arrest him." "Who does that? What kind of father does that?" Mark stood by the refrigerator, his arms crossed, his face pale. He didn't say anything. He just watched Ryan. Ryan shoveled a forkful of eggs into his mouth and swallowed. He looked at me, then at Mark. It was hell in there. Ryan said. His voice was raspy. "The guy in the cell next to me was screaming all night. The toilet didn't have a seat. It is disgusting. You have no idea what it is like." I looked at him, waiting for the other part. The part where he asked if Haley was okay. The part where he apologized for destroying the only asset I owned. "Is that all you have to say?" I asked quietly. Ryan wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Look, Chloe, I am sorry about the car, okay? But you didn't have to let Dad hang me out to dry. It was just a fender bender. The road was slick. The tires were bald. The tires were brand new. Ryan," I said, my voice shaking, "I bought them 2 months ago, and it wasn't a fender bender. You totaled it. It is gone." Ryan waved his hand dismissively. "It looks worse than it is. A little body work. It will be fine. You are being dramatic. This is ruining my life. Chloe, I have a court date now. I have a record. Do you know how hard it is going to be to get a job now?" I felt like I was floating outside of my body. The narcissism was so dense it had its own gravitational pull. "Your life?" I whispered. "Ryan. That was Haley's car. That was my $15,000. Linda slammed the plate of toast onto the table. "Money! That is all you care about. Your brother is traumatized, and you are worried about $15,000. We can fix the car. We will figure it out. But you can't fix what you did to his spirit." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had nursed me through fevers and braided my hair. And I realized I didn't know her. Or rather, I knew her, but I was seeing her through a new lens. A lens cracked by betrayal. I felt like an intruder in the kitchen where I had grown up. "I am leaving," I said. I turned and walked out. Mark followed me to the door. "I am sorry." "Chloe," he said softly, "don't apologize for her." "Dad," I said, "just don't." I took an Uber back to the duplex, my stomach churning. When I walked in, Haley was still on the couch. She looked up. "Is he okay?" she asked. Because she was good. Because despite everything, she had a heart that hadn't been hardened by 30 years of Ryan's nonsense. "He is fine. Hales," I said. "He is eating eggs." I went back to the kitchen table. My phone was ringing. It was Harborline Insurance again. "Ms. Thompson? It is Brenda." "Yes," I said, grabbing a pen. "Do you have an update?" "Well, we have reviewed the preliminary police report," Brenda said. Her tone had changed. It was cooler, more professional. "It indicates that the driver, Ryan Thompson, was not a listed driver on your policy." "Right," I said. "He borrowed the car. That is covered under permissive use, isn't it?" "Usually, yes," Brenda said. "However, The report also indicates that the driver was charged with driving under the influence. And I see here that your policy has a specific exclusion for non-listed drivers operating the vehicle while committing a criminal act or under the influence of narcotics or alcohol. The world stopped spinning. It just froze. What does that mean? I asked, though I knew exactly what it meant. It means, Ms. Thompson, that the liability coverage might apply to the guardrail damage. But the collision coverage, the payout for your vehicle itself, is likely going to be denied. We are sending it to the Underwriting Review Board. But I wanted to prepare you. Denied? I squeaked. If the exclusion holds. Yes. I hung up the phone. I stared at the wall. I had a loan on that car. I had paid $10,000 in cash, but I had financed the remaining $5,000 to build my credit score. I still owed $3,800. If they denied the claim, I wouldn't just be out the car. I would be paying nearly $4,000 for a pile of scrap metal that I couldn't even drive. I put my head in my hands and I dry heaved. I didn't vomit, but my body convulsed with the physical sickness of financial ruin. It was a specific kind of nausea that only poor people understood. The feeling of the ground opening up beneath you. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang again. It was Mark. He came in quietly. He looked even worse than he had in the morning. He walked over to the couch where Haley was sitting. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. Mark sat down on the coffee table, facing her. He took her hands in his. "Haley," he said gently, "I am so sorry about your car." "It is okay." She lied. "It is just a car." Mark looked at her, studying her face. "Tell me something," he said. "What was the plan?" "With the car?" Haley looked down at her hands. "I was going to commute to Riverton," she said. Riverton Community College was 30 miles away. I did the math. She continued, her voice gaining a little strength. "If I lived here and drove to Riverton, I could save about $8,000 a year on room and board compared to staying in the dorms. I could work weekends at the cafe. I could graduate with almost no debt." She paused, biting her lip. "The bus doesn't go to Riverton, Grandpa. Not for the early classes." Mark's face tightened. I watched the muscles in his jaw work. He looked from Haley to me. He realized, in that moment, that the Civic wasn't a luxury. It wasn't a teenage joyride machine. It was the infrastructure of her future. It was the tool that was going to break the cycle of poverty that I had been fighting for a decade. And Ryan had smashed it because he wanted to buy a part for a truck he couldn't legally drive. "I see," Mark said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I see." He stayed for dinner, but he didn't eat much. He pushed his spaghetti around the plate. He kept looking at Haley, a look of profound sorrow in his eyes. At 7 o'clock, he left, but before he got into his car, he called my cell phone. "Chloe," he said, "I need you to meet me." "Meet you? You just left." "Not here. I need you to meet me at Keller and Burns Legal Services. It is out on Route 9. "Now?" I asked. "It is late. Please, Chloe. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell Ryan. Just get a ride and meet me there in 45 minutes. The urgency in his voice scared me. Mark wasn't a secretive man. He was a man of routine, of open books. "I will be there," I said. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, to sit with Haley, telling her I had to run to the pharmacy. I called a lift. Keller and Burns was a small, brick building on the edge of town, wedged between a dentist's office and a dry cleaner. The windows were dark, except for one office in the back. Mark's sedan was the only car in the lot. I walked to the door. It was locked. Mark opened it a second later. "Come in," he said. He led me down a hallway lined with fake ficus trees to an office at the end. Inside, a woman was sitting behind a large mahogany table covered in files. She looked to be about 50, with sharp glasses and a no-nonsense bob cut. "Chloe, this is Erica Keller," Mark said. "She is my attorney." Erica stood up and shook my hand. Her grip was firm. "Ms. Thompson, thank you for coming on such short notice." I sat down next to my father. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at a specific file on the desk. "What is going on?" I asked. "Is this about Ryan's defense?" No, Mark said. He took a deep breath. Erica cleared her throat. Your father came to see me 6 months ago. Chloe. He wanted to discuss updating his will and the structure of the family trust. Specifically, the small trust that your grandmother, Nora, left for the grandchildren. I nodded. The one that bought the car, or half of it. Correct, Erica said. At that time, Mark was hesitant. He drafted some changes, but he didn't sign them. He wanted to give it more time. Tonight, he called me and asked to finalize everything immediately. I looked at Mark. Dad? Mark turned to me. His eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. Chloe, there is something you don't know. Something I never told you. I waited. My heart started that familiar thumping again. You know that Grandma Nora left $10,000 for each grandchild, Mark said. You got yours. You used it for school. And Haley's portion, the $5,000 we used for the car. Yes, I said. And Ryan's portion, Mark said. Ryan spent his on that motorcycle he crashed. Didn't he? I asked. That is what you told me. Mark closed his eyes. No, Ryan didn't spend it on a motorcycle. He took a shaky breath. 4 years ago, when you were struggling with the medical bills from Haley's appendectomy, do you remember? Yes. I said, I almost went bankrupt. Ryan came to me. Mark said, he was in trouble, some gambling debts. He needed money fast. He begged me. I felt the blood drain from my face. He had access to the account details because I left the file on my desk. Mark continued. He forged my signature. He drained Grandma Nora's account. All of it. His share, and the rest of Haley's share. I stared at him. The room seemed to tilt. He stole from Haley? I whispered. He stole from a 13-year-old girl? Mark nodded. I found out a month later. I was furious. I threatened to go to the police. But your mother, she cried. She begged. She said it would ruin him. So I made a deal with myself. I took out a home equity line on the house, and I replenished the account. I put every cent back. I never told you because I didn't want to blow up the family. I didn't want you to hate him. I sat there, processing the betrayal. The years of financial terror I had lived through. The nights I cried over bills. And all the while, my brother had stolen our safety net, and my father had covered it up. You protected him, I said, my voice trembling with rage. You protected a thief. I did, Mark said, and I was wrong. He picked up a pen from the desk. He gripped it so hard his knuckles turned white. When I saw that Civic in the ditch last night, Mark said, his voice gaining volume, getting stronger. When I saw the airbags hanging out, I didn't just see a car crash. I saw 20 years of my own cowardice. I saw every time I paid a fine, every time I lied to a neighbor, every time I hushed you up to keep the peace. He looked at me, and his eyes were fierce. I realized that by saving him, I was hurting you. I was hurting Haley. I was feeding a monster and calling it love. He looked at Erica. I am done covering, he said. No matter what it costs. Erica slid a document across the table. Mark, these are the new terms. This creates a trust for the house and the remaining assets. It explicitly excludes Ryan from direct inheritance and redirects any beneficiary funds to satisfy outstanding legal judgments and restitution. Mark didn't hesitate. He didn't look for a pen. He already had one. He didn't look for Linda's approval. He just signed his name. The scratching of the pen on the paper sounded loud in the quiet office. He put the pen down and looked at me. This isn't just about the will. Chloe, Mark said, we are going to make him pay for the car. I don't care if the insurance denies it. I don't care if he has to garnish his wages for the next 10 years. He is going to learn that actions have consequences, even if I have to be the one to teach him. I looked at the signature on the document. It was shaky, but it was there. Does Mom know? I asked. No, Mark said. And when she finds out? She might never forgive me. He reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was rough, calloused from years of work, but I would rather she hate me than watch my granddaughter lose her future. He said. I squeezed his hand back. For the first time since the crash, I didn't feel entirely alone. I felt like I finally had a father. instead of just a peacekeeper. But as I looked at the legal documents that would slice our family in two, I knew the war was just beginning. The envelope from Harborline Auto Insurance arrived on a Tuesday, 3 days after the crash. It was thin, flimsy, and looked deceptively unimportant sitting in my mailbox between a grocery store circular and a credit card offer. But I knew better. In the world of medical billing and debt management, the worst news always came in the thinnest envelopes. Good news was thick: contracts, welcome packets, detailed explanations of benefits. Bad news was a single sheet of paper that said, "No." I didn't open it until I was inside. Standing over the kitchen counter with a serrated knife in my hand, the house was quiet. Haley was at school, having left 2 hours earlier than usual to catch the first of 2 buses that would get her there. I slit the top of the envelope and pulled out the letter. "Dear Ms. Thompson, regarding claim number 4492 Alpha." I skipped the boilerplate language about valuing me as a customer and went straight to the paragraph that mattered. The paragraph that determined whether I was going to be solvent or drowning. After a thorough review of the police report and policy exclusions, Harborline has determined that the collision coverage for the 2014 Honda Civic is void under Section C. Clause 4, the driver, Ryan Thompson, was not a listed operator on the policy. Furthermore, the police report indicates the vehicle was operated while the driver was under the influence of alcohol, which constitutes a breach of the safe usage agreement found on page 12 of your policy contract. I felt my knees lock. I forced myself to read on. However, as a gesture of goodwill and under the liability variance for property damage to state infrastructure, guardrail, we will issue a partial payout for the salvage value of the vehicle, minus the deductible and non-compliance penalty. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page, $1,240. I stared at it. The number didn't make sense. It was a typo. It had to be a typo. I owed $3,800 on the loan. The car was worth $15,000 on the private market, and they were offering me $1,200. If I accepted this, I would still owe the bank over $2,500. I would be paying a monthly bill for a car that was currently a crushed cube of metal in a scrapyard, and I would have absolutely nothing, $0, to put toward a replacement vehicle. I crumpled the letter in my fist, squeezing it until my nails dug into my palm. A scream built up in my throat, a primal, jagged thing, but I swallowed it down. Screaming cost energy, and I couldn't afford to waste a single calorie. I had to go to work. The reality of our new life set in immediately, and it was brutal. The Honda Civic had been more than a car. It was a time machine. It gave Haley time to study, time to sleep, time to work. Without it, her life became a logistical nightmare. Ridgeview's public transit system was designed for people with nowhere to be in a hurry. To get to her high school by 7:30 in the morning, Haley had to catch the 6:10 bus from the corner of Heavy and Main. That meant she was up at 5:15, stumbling around the dark house while I was still asleep. On Thursday afternoon, the sky opened up again. It was a cold, driving rain that turned the gutters into rushing rivers. I was home early, trying to figure out how to stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 meals. When the front door opened, Haley stood there. She was soaked. Her hair was plastered to her skull. Her backpack was dripping onto the laminate floor, and her lips were blue. "Honey?" I dropped the spoon and ran to her. "What happened? You were supposed to be at the cafe. The bus was late," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. The connection at 4th Street never came. I waited for 40 minutes in the rain. Mom, by the time the next one came, I was already an hour late for my shift. She dropped her backpack. It hit the floor with a wet thud. "Jenna sent me home," she said. "She told me if I can't be reliable, she has to give my shifts to someone else." I reached out to take her coat, but she flinched away from me. She walked to the middle of the room and stood there, water pooling around her sneakers. "I tried to call you." I said, "My phone died." "It doesn't matter," Haley said. She looked at me, and her eyes were dark holes of exhaustion. "It is just a job. Hales, we will talk to Jenna. She will understand." "No, she won't," Haley shouted. The sound was shocking in the small room. She never raised her voice. She doesn't care about my car troubles. Mom! She cares that I am there to pour coffee. She wiped her face aggressively, mixing tears with rain. I feel like the universe is punishing me. Mom! The words hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Punishing you for what? I asked softly. For wanting nice things. She sobbed. For thinking I could be different than the rest of this family. For thinking I could just drive to school like a normal person and not have to struggle for every single inch. She ran to her room and slammed the door. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the muffled sounds of her crying. I looked at the crumpled insurance letter on the counter. The shame burned in my chest. Hot and acidic. I had promised her it would be different. I had promised her that if she worked hard and got good grades, the struggle wouldn't touch her. But the struggle had a name, and his name was Ryan. I didn't sleep that night. By Friday morning, the sadness had calcified into a hard, cold anger. I drove my own beat-up sedan to my parents' house after dropping Haley at the bus stop. I insisted on driving her that morning, even though it made me late for work. When I walked into the kitchen on Maple Crest Lane, Linda was folding laundry. The house smelled of lavender and denial. "Chloe," Linda said, not looking up, "there is coffee in the pot." I didn't want coffee. I wanted justice. "I got the letter from the insurance company," I said, leaning against the counter. "Oh?" Linda smoothed a towel. "That is good. At least that is settled." "It is not settled. Mom, they are paying $1,200. I owe nearly $4,000 on the loan. The car is gone, and I am in debt." Linda stopped folding. She looked at me, her face tightening. "Well, that is unfortunate," she said, "but these insurance companies are all crooks. You know that." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I can't pay that loan, and Haley can't keep taking the bus. She lost a shift yesterday. She is failing a history quiz because she is too tired to study. So drive her," Linda said. "You are her mother. Mom, I work from 8 to 6. I can't drive her to school and pick her up and get her to work and get myself to the office." I took a breath. Ryan needs to pay for it. Linda froze. She slowly set down the towel and turned to face me. "Excuse me?" "Ryan," I repeated. "He needs to make the payments on the loan. It is $300 a month until it is paid off, and he needs to pay me back the $10,000 I put down. I don't care how long it takes. $50 a week, $20. But he has to pay." Linda let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You cannot be serious," she said. "I am deadly serious. He destroyed her car. He should pay for it. It is basic fairness." "Fairness?" Linda's voice rose to a shriek. "You are talking about kicking your brother when he is down. He is facing criminal charges. Chloe, he has legal fees. He might lose his license. He is depressed. He barely leaves his room." "He is depressed?" I asked, my voice rising to match hers. "Haley is sobbing in her room because she thinks the universe hates her. Ryan got drunk and wrecked her car. Why is his sadness more important than her actual loss?" "Because he is family," Linda shouted, "and he has nothing. How do you expect him to pay you $10,000? He doesn't have 10 cents. Then he can get a job." I said, "He can shovel snow. He can sell that stupid truck." "Don't you dare touch his truck," Linda hissed. "That is the only thing he has left. You are just trying to bankrupt him. You want to see him on the street. I want him to take responsibility. He made a mistake." Linda slammed her hand on the counter. "Why can't you just let it go? Figure it out. Chloe, you always figure it out. Trade down. Get her a cheaper car. Buy her a bicycle. Why does she need a Civic? Why does she have to be so special?" I recoiled as if she had slapped me. "Trade down?" I whispered. "You want me to tell my daughter that because her uncle is a screw-up? She has to lower her standards? That she deserves less because he took more?" Linda crossed her arms. "I am saying that family helps family. We don't sue them. We don't demand money they don't have. If you were a good sister, you would understand that he is hurting." I looked at my mother, really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. The the terrifying fear that if she ever stopped enabling Ryan, he would crumble into dust. And she would rather sacrifice me and Haley than face that reality. "I am done understanding," I said. I turned to leave. "Chloe." Wait. It wasn't Linda. It was Mark. He had been standing in the doorway to the garage, silent as a ghost. He was wearing his work coveralls. "Come here," he said. I ignored Linda's glare and followed my father into the garage. He closed the door, cutting off the sound of Linda's angry muttering. The garage was cold, smelling of sawdust and motor oil. It was the only place in the house that felt like Mark. He walked over to his workbench and leaned against it. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes were deeper than I remembered. "She won't listen." "Dad," I said, wiping a tear from my cheek. "She thinks I am the villain." "I know," Mark said softly. He picked up a wrench, turning it over in his hands. "She can't see it. She has spent 30 years building a reality where Ryan is the victim. If she admits he is the villain, she has to admit she made him that way." He looked up at me. "You need to sue him." "Chloe?" I blinked. "What?" "You need to file a civil claim for damages." Mark said, "Not small claims, a real civil suit, for the value of the car, for the loss of use, for the loan balance, everything." "Dad, Linda will go nuclear. She will never speak to me again." "She might not," Mark admitted. "But if you wait for Ryan to offer to pay, or for your mother to make him pay, you will be waiting until you are in the grave." He set the wrench down with a clang. "This time, he has to feel it," Mark said. His voice was hard, not in his feelings, not in his reputation, in his bank account. "He needs to know that when he breaks something, he pays for it. Not me, not you, him. I can't afford a lawyer." "Dad, you know that. I spoke to Erica." Mark said, "She will take the case on a contingency basis. She says it is open and shut. The police report is the evidence. But Ryan has no money." I said, "A judgment is just a piece of paper if he is broke." Mark looked at me, a strange expression on his face, a mix of shame and resolve. "He might have money in the future," Mark said, "and when he does, that judgment will be there waiting for him." I went back to see Erica Keller 2 days later. The office was just as quiet, just as serious. Mark met me there again, entering separately so Linda wouldn't suspect a conspiracy. Erica laid it out for me. "Filing suit is aggressive. Chloe," she said, her pen hovering over a yellow legal pad. "It sends a message, but you need to understand what it opens up." "Like what?" I asked. "Discovery," Erica said. "If we sue for damages, we have to look at Ryan's assets. And because Ryan's finances are entangled with your parents, it might get messy." She looked at Mark. Mark nodded for her to continue. "Your father has shared some records with me," Erica said. "There are several accounts, joint accounts between Mark and Ryan, small savings accounts where Mark has been depositing money to cover Ryan's rent, his phone bill, his truck insurance." I felt a flash of irritation. "Dad, you told me you stopped paying for him." "I stopped giving him cash," Mark said, looking down. "But I kept the auto drafts on. I didn't want him to be homeless. If we sue," Erica continued, "these accounts become part of the record. It will be public that Mark has been propping him up. It might be embarrassing." "I don't care," Mark said. "Let it be public. I am tired of hiding my own stupidity." Erica turned a page. "There is another mechanism we are putting in place. The clause I drafted for Mark's will? We are expanding it to the existing family trust." She pushed a document toward me. "This is a splashover clause." She explained, "Mark is the trustee of the family funds. He is amending the trust so that any distribution that would normally go to Ryan, whether it is a monthly allowance or an eventual inheritance, is automatically intercepted." "Intercepted?" I asked. "Redirected," Erica corrected. "If you get a civil judgment against Ryan, say for $20,000, the trust is legally bound to pay that judgment directly to you before Ryan receives a single penny. Essentially, we are using Mark's money to force Ryan to pay you back." I looked at my father. He was effectively disinheriting his son in slow motion. Dollar by dollar, to make me whole. You are sure about this? I asked him. Mark didn't answer immediately. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. There is one more thing, he said. He placed the phone on the mahogany table. His hand was shaking so bad the phone rattled against the wood. I found this on Ryan's old phone, Mark said. He left it in the garage when he got a new one last month. I was going to wipe it and trade it in, but I checked the voice memos. Why? I asked. Because I wanted to know. Mark whispered. I wanted to know what he really thought of us. He pressed play. The audio was crackly. The sound of wind and background chatter. It sounded like a party. I heard the pop of a can opening. Yeah, man, she is ridiculous. Ryan's voice boomed. It was slurred, thick with beer. Bought the kid a Civic. A freaking Civic. I am driving a truck with 200,000 miles. And the princess gets a leather interior. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Another voice, unidentified, laughed. That is rough. Man, your sister is looking out for her own. Though, she is looking down on me. Ryan spat. The venom in his voice was startling. Walking around like she is better than everyone because she has a salary. And Haley, God, that kid needs a reality check. Driving around like she owns the road. There was a pause, and the sound of drinking. I ought to take it for a spin, Ryan said, chuckling darkly, just to scare her a little, teach her a lesson, show her that cars get wrecked, people move on, put a dent in her princess life. Maybe then she wouldn't be so smug. Mark stopped the recording. The silence in the room was deafening. I felt physically ill. The bile rose in my throat, tasting of acid and betrayal. He said that, I stammered. He said that weeks ago? Mark nodded. The date stamp is 3 weeks before the crash. I stared at the phone. It wasn't an accident. I mean, the crash might have been an accident, caused by rain and booze, but the intent, the malice, it was premeditated. He hated her. He hated my daughter because she had a car and he didn't. He wanted to wreck it. I whispered. He didn't want to go to the parts store. He wanted to hurt us. Mark looked down at his hands. I listened to that recording the morning after the crash. He said, That is why I am here. Chloe, that is why I am signing everything. Because it wasn't just drunk driving, it was hateful. I looked at Mark, and a sudden, terrible thought struck me. Dad, I said slowly, did you hear this before the crash? Mark's head snapped up. No. God, no. Chloe, I swear. I found the phone in a box of junk in the garage on Monday. If I had heard this before... He trailed off, but the question hung there. Mark had enabled Ryan for 30 years. He had covered up theft. He had paid off victims. Could I trust him? I looked at Erica. Can we use this? Erica looked grim. It is powerful, she said. In a civil trial, this establishes a pattern of behavior. It moves the needle from negligence to willful misconduct. It could triple the damages. It proves that his recklessness wasn't a random mistake. It was a pattern of hostility. But, she warned, playing this in court, or even in mediation, it will destroy whatever relationship you have left with him, and it will devastate your mother. I thought about Haley standing in the kitchen, soaking wet, crying about the universe punishing her. I thought about the princess comment. I thought about Ryan eating eggs while my daughter took the bus. Do it, I said. That night, I sat on the edge of Haley's bed. She was pretending to read a history textbook, but I could tell she was reading the same page over and over. Haley, I said gently, I need to tell you something. She looked up. What is it? Did Grandma call? No. I said, I'm going to sue Ryan. Haley closed the book. She didn't look surprised. She looked tired. For the money? She asked. For the car. I said, and because it is the right thing to do, he needs to be responsible. Haley picked at a loose thread on her quilt. She was quiet for a long time. If you do this, she asked, her voice trembling, is Grandpa going to lose Mom? I froze. It was the question I had been avoiding. I don't know. Sweetie, Is Uncle Ryan going to hate us forever? She asked. He might, I admitted. Haley looked at me, her eyes wide and wet. Mom, she whispered, I want the car back. I really do. But are we going to blow up the whole family for $15,000? I reached out and brushed the hair from her forehead. It isn't about the money anymore. Hales, I said, thinking of the recording on Mark's phone. It is about the fact that you deserve to be safe, and you deserve to be protected, even from family. Haley nodded slowly, but she didn't look convinced. She looked like a child watching a storm roll in, knowing there was no shelter that could keep everyone dry. I turned off the light and left her room, but I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the silence of the house, wondering if I was fixing our lives or just lighting the fuse on the final explosion. Lakeside County Court was a building designed to make you feel small. The ceilings were too high. The floors were terrazzo tiles that echoed every footstep like a gunshot, and the air smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a place where lives were disassembled and put back together in shapes that never quite fit right again. On the morning of the hearing, the courtroom was divided by an aisle that was only 4 feet wide, but it might as well have been the Grand Canyon. I sat on the right side, on a hard wooden bench that dug into my spine. My father, Mark, sat next to me. He was wearing his only suit, a navy blue number he had bought for a funeral 5 years ago. It hung loosely on his frame now. In the last week, he seemed to have shrunk, as if the weight of his conscience was physically compressing his bones. On the left side sat my mother and my brother. Linda was clinging to Ryan's arm with a desperation that was painful to watch. She was whispering in his ear, smoothing the collar of his shirt, patting his hand. She looked at us, at her husband and her daughter, with a gaze that was pure ice. It wasn't just anger. It was the look you give to strangers who have insulted you in a grocery store. We were no longer her people. We were the opposition. Ryan looked bored. He was wearing a dress shirt that was too tight at the neck and no tie. He spent the time before the judge arrived scrolling on his phone, occasionally leaning over to whisper something to his public defender, a harried-looking man with a stack of files that looked ready to topple over. I felt like an intruder at my own brother's trial. I felt the eyes of the few other people in the gallery boring into my back. There is the sister, they were probably thinking, the one who turned him in. When the bailiff called, "All rise," the sound of the benches scraping against the floor made me flinch. Judge Harrison walked in. She was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a demeanor that suggested she had seen every lie a human being was capable of telling. The prosecutor, a young woman named Ms. Alcott, moved through the preliminaries quickly. The charges were driving under the influence and destruction of property. Ryan had pleaded not guilty, claiming the breathalyzer was faulty and the road conditions were the primary cause of the accident. I was the first witness called. I walked to the stand, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down and looked out at the room. I tried to catch my mother's eye, but she deliberately looked at the ceiling. Ryan was staring at his cuticles. Only Mark was looking at me, giving me a small, grim nod. Ms. Alcott asked me to describe the events of that Sunday. I told the story, the dinner, the tension, the way Ryan had fixated on the car. Did you want to lend him the vehicle? Ms. Alcott asked. No, I said. My voice was shaky, so I cleared my throat and tried again. No, I refused several times. Why did you eventually agree? Because my mother asked me to. I said, looking down at my hands. She didn't want to fight. She said I was making him feel small. I just wanted to keep the peace. And what conditions did you set? 30 minutes. I said, straight to the auto parts store and straight back. No stops, no passengers. Thank you. Ms. Thompson. Then it was the public defender's turn. Mr. Gentry stood up. He didn't look malicious, just tired. He was doing a job. Ms. Thompson, he said, adjusting his glasses. You say you refused several times. But ultimately, you handed him the keys, correct? Yes, I said. So, you gave him permission. I gave him permission under duress. I said, "Duress? Mr. Gentry smiled slightly. Did he threaten you? Did he have a weapon?" "No," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. But the emotional pressure. Mr. Gentry interrupted me. "Ms. Thompson, families argue. That is not duress. You handed him the keys. You authorized him to drive the vehicle. Is it possible that in the heat of a family dinner, the specific details of where he could go were misunderstood?" "No," I said firmly. "I was very clear." "You say you were clear," Mr. Gentry said, pacing in front of the stand. "But isn't it true that your brother often runs errands for the family? Isn't it possible he thought he had your blessing to test drive the car to ensure it was safe for your daughter?" He was mocking me. He was twisting the reality of that night until I sounded like the unreasonable one. "He was drunk," I said. "He totaled the car." "We are establishing permission, Ms. Thompson," Mr. Gentry said sharply. "And it sounds to me like this was a family misunderstanding that you are now trying to criminalize because you are upset about the damage." I looked at Linda. She was nodding vigorously, her lips pressed in a tight line of vindication. "See?" her face said. "It was just a misunderstanding." I stepped down from the stand feeling dirty. I felt like I had been tricked into admitting that I was responsible for my own victimization. Then they called Mark. The atmosphere in the room changed the moment my father stood up. He walked to the stand with a slow, heavy gait. He didn't look at Linda. He didn't look at Ryan. He looked straight at the judge. "State your name for the record," the clerk said. "Mark Thompson," my father said. "Ms. Alcott stood up. "Mr. Thompson, you are the defendant's father?" "I am," Mark said. "And you were present on the night of the crash?" "Yes." "Can you describe your son's condition when you arrived at the scene?" "He was standing by a patrol car," Mark said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He smelled of alcohol. His eyes were glassy. He was slurring his words. He was trying to convince the officer that the rain caused the crash. "And what did you do?" "I told the officer to test him," Mark said. A ripple of murmurs went through the small gallery. It was rare for a father to testify against a son. It was unheard of for a father to admit he ordered the arrest. "Why did you do that?" Ms. Alcott asked. "Because he was drunk," Mark said. "And because he was driving my granddaughter's car. And because I was tired of hoping he wouldn't kill someone." Mr. Gentry stood up for cross-examination. He looked less confident with Mark. He tried to paint Mark as a harsh, unloving father. "Mr. Thompson." "Mr. Gentry said, "you seem very eager to see your son punished. Is there bad blood between you?" "He is my son," Mark said. "I love him." "You love him?" Mr. Gentry scoffed. "You demanded the police arrest him. That doesn't sound like love. That sounds like resentment. Isn't it true that you have always favored your daughter? That you are angry your son hasn't been as financially successful?" Mark gripped the railing of the witness stand. His knuckles turned white. "No," Mark said. "Then why?" Mr. Gentry pressed. "Why this sudden need for justice over a property damage claim? It is just a car." Mr. Thompson, "Why destroy your son's life over a car?" Mark looked at Ryan. Ryan was smirking. That familiar, arrogant curl of the lip that said, "I am going to get away with this." "Because of the boy on the bike," Mark said. The room went silent. Even the judge looked up from her notes. "Excuse me?" Mr. Gentry asked. Mark took a breath that sounded like a rattle in his chest. 12 years ago," Mark said. "Ryan was 17. He had an old pickup truck. He was driving too fast on Maple Crest Lane. He lost control and went through a neighbor's fence." Mr. Gentry looked confused. "Objection. Relevance. Overruled." The judge said, "Continue." Mr. Thompson, "He didn't just hit the fence." Mark said, "He hit a boy. The Miller kid. He was on his bicycle in the driveway." I gasped. My hand flew to my mouth. I had never heard this story. I was living in the dorms at college 12 years ago. I remembered Ryan crashing a truck. But I was told it was a tree. I was told no one was hurt. He broke the boy's leg. Mark continued. It was a bad break. Compound fracture. And what happened? Ms. Alcott asked. Stepping forward, Mark looked down at his hands. Linda and I. We went to the Millers. Mark whispered. We begged them not to call the police. We told them it would ruin Ryan's life. We offered to pay for the medical bills. We offered to pay for the fence. We gave them $5,000 cash for pain and suffering. He looked up, and his eyes were wet. We bought his freedom, Mark said. We paid them to stay quiet, and they did. Ryan never spent a day in court. He never paid a dime. He learned that night that if he hurts someone, Daddy will write a check. Mark pointed a trembling finger at Ryan. That was the worst mistake of my life, Mark said, his voice breaking. Because I taught him that he is above the consequences. I created this, and I am not doing it anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Linda. She wasn't nodding anymore. She was pale, her mouth open in a silent scream of betrayal. Ryan wasn't smirking. He looked shocked, as if the ground had suddenly turned to glass beneath his feet. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, 12 years ago, while I was eating ramen noodles and working 2 jobs to pay for textbooks. My parents were paying thousands of dollars to cover up a hit and run. While I was budgeting for pennies, they were running a hush money fund for their golden boy. Mark stepped down from the stand. He walked past Linda, but she wouldn't look at him. He sat down next to me. He was shaking. I reached out and took his hand. It was ice cold. The rest of the hearing was a blur. The lawyers made closing arguments, but the energy had been sucked out of the defense. You couldn't argue family misunderstanding after a father confessed to a decade-old cover-up. When the judge called a recess before sentencing, we all filtered out into the hallway. It was immediate. Linda marched up to Mark. Her purse clutched against her chest like a shield. "How could you?" she hissed. Her voice was shaking with rage. "How could you drag those skeletons out? In public? I told the truth." "Linda," Mark said wearily. "You humiliated us," she screamed, not caring who heard. "You humiliated your son." That was over. It was settled. Why would you bring that up? Just to make yourself look righteous? Just to play the martyr? It wasn't settled. Mark said, "Look at him. Linda, look at where we are." It wasn't settled. It was just waiting. Ryan stepped up beside Linda. He looked at Mark with pure hatred. "You are dead to me," Ryan said. "You chose her." He jerked a thumb at me. "You chose Chloe over your own son. Hope you are happy. Dad. Hope she is worth it." I stood there, pinned against the wall by their venom. I wanted to defend Mark. I wanted to scream that Mark hadn't chosen me. He had chosen sanity. He had chosen the law. But deep down, a small, sick part of me felt the guilt they wanted me to feel. I was the catalyst. If I hadn't let him take the car, none of this would be happening. If I had just said no and stuck to it, the secrets would have stayed buried. But then I thought of the boy on the bike. I thought of a child with a broken leg, silenced by my father's checkbook, and I realized that my guilt was misplaced. The catalyst wasn't the car keys. The catalyst was the first time they said yes to a lie. We went back inside. Judge Harrison didn't waste time. "Ryan Thompson," she said, looking over her glasses, "the court finds you guilty of driving under the influence and reckless endangerment." She sentenced him to 18 months of probation, mandatory alcohol counseling, twice a week, a suspension of his driver's license for 1 year, and a restitution order for the full value of the vehicle and the damage to the guardrail. It was a victory on paper. It was everything we had asked for. But as the bailiff led Ryan out to process his paperwork, he walked past our bench. He leaned in, just close enough for me to smell the stale anxiety on him. "I am not paying you a dime," he whispered. "You will see." Then he was gone. The drive home was silent. Mark dropped me off at my duplex. "I am sorry," I said to him as I got out. "Don't be," Mark said. He looked at the steering wheel. "I should have done it 12 years ago." The fallout was swift. By that evening, Linda had moved her things into the guest room at the house on Maple Crest Lane. She didn't leave Mark. She didn't have the income to leave, and perhaps, in her warped way, she thought staying was a greater punishment. She simply withdrew. She stopped cooking. She stopped speaking to him. She treated him like a ghost that was haunting her hallways. The house, which had once been the center of chaotic, loud family birthdays, became a cold, quiet battleground. They lived in separate silos, passing each other in the kitchen without making eye contact. Linda blocked my number. When I called the house phone to check on her, she would pick up, hear my voice, and hang up without a word. 3 days after the trial, Mark called me. "Meet me at Erica's," he said. We sat in the same office, the same mahogany table, but this time, the mood was final. There was no debate. There was no hesitation. Erica laid out a thick stack of documents. "We are establishing the living trust today," Erica said. She walked us through the details. The house on Maple Crest Lane, the only significant asset my parents owned, was being placed into the trust. Mark looked at me. "Your mother has a right to live there for the rest of her life." Mark said, "I am not throwing her out. I would never do that. But upon her death, or if we both pass, the house goes to the trust, and the beneficiaries of the trust are Chloe Thompson and Haley Thompson." Erica said. She turned a page. "There is a specific exclusion clause." She said, "Ryan Thompson is disinherited from the real estate assets. He receives nothing. Furthermore, any liquid assets remaining in the estate at the time of death will be used first to satisfy any outstanding restitution judgments held by the trust beneficiaries, meaning, if he still hasn't paid you for the Civic in 20 years, Mark said, looking at me. "The money comes out of his share of the life insurance before he sees a cent." I looked at the papers. It was brutal. It was a complete excision of a family member. It was the kind of thing you read about in novels, not the kind of thing you did to the brother you used to build forts with in the living room. I felt a tearing sensation in my chest. Part of me, the sister part, felt like a thief. I was stealing his birthright. I was capitalizing on his failure to secure my own future. I could hear Linda's voice in my head, screaming that I was greedy, that I was vindictive. But then I remembered the courtroom. I remembered the story of the boy on the bike. I remembered Haley waiting in the rain for a bus that never came. I remembered years of Christmas mornings where Ryan got the expensive gadgets, and I got the sensible sweaters because Chloe understands the value of $1. I remembered the way my needs were always secondary, always deferred, because I was the strong one. I was the one who could handle it. I looked at my father. He was signing the deed transfer. He was signing away his right to leave his home to his son. He was doing it with a shaking hand, but he was doing it. For the first time in my 32 years, my father was putting a protective wall around me. "Not Ryan," he was saying, with every stroke of the pen, that my stability mattered more than Ryan's feelings. I picked up the pen. I deserve this. The thought felt foreign, almost selfish, but it was true. I deserved to be someone's first choice. I signed my name as the future trustee. The ink was black and permanent. When we walked out into the parking lot, the sun was setting. It was a cold, crisp evening. "Thank you, Dad," I said. Mark looked at the sunset. He looked incredibly lonely. "You don't have to thank me. Chloe," he said, "I am just balancing the books." He got into his car and drove back to the house where his wife wouldn't speak to him. I watched him go, clutching the folder of documents to my chest. I had the legal victory. I had the trust. I had the judgment. But as I stood there in the fading light, I realized that justice is a heavy thing to carry. It weighs exactly as much as the love you have to kill to get it. If the weeks following the trial were a battle, the month that followed was a cold war, fought not with shouting matches, but with propaganda. Ryan did not go quietly into the night. Instead, he moved into a studio apartment above a defunct laundromat on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. It was a miserable place with peeling linoleum and a stairwell that smelled perpetually of damp lint and cat urine, to anyone looking closely. It was the natural result of a 29-year-old man having no savings, no credit, and a criminal record. But Ryan did not let people look closely. He curated his own reality. He began a campaign of digital martyrdom. He posted grainy, black and white videos on social media, sitting on a mattress on the floor, staring out a window with a caption like, "Abandoned by the people who are supposed to protect you," or "Money changes blood." He didn't name me or Mark directly, but the implication was clear enough for the extended family to pick up the scent. My phone started buzzing with texts from cousins I hadn't seen since Christmas. "Hey Chloe, just saw Ryan's post. Is he really homeless? That seems harsh. Your mom says you guys kicked him out? He is family. Chloe, he wasn't homeless. He had a roof. He had heat. He had a job washing dishes at a diner. A condition of his probation. But to the world, he was the prodigal son who had been locked out of the castle by a greedy sister and a senile father." Linda drank the Kool-Aid by the gallon. She stopped calling me entirely. Her communication was reduced to clipped, icy text messages that arrived with the predictability of a migraine. "Your father forgot to take his blood pressure medication again today. He is mentally declining. Chloe, I hope you are happy. That lawyer of yours is a shark. She is using fear to loot this family. You need to stop this before she takes everything." I stared at that text one night while waiting for the kettle to boil. Loot the family. It was rich coming from the woman who had sanctioned the looting of Grandma Nora's account, but the accusation planted a seed of cold dread in my stomach. If Linda believed Mark was mentally declining, she could try to challenge the trust. She could argue he was coerced. She could drag us into probate court for years. My own life had become a high-wire act performed without a net, to cover the gap left by the car payment I was still making on a crushed vehicle. Plus the legal retainers for Erica. I picked up 3 evening shifts a week at Harborview. I was working 12-hour days. Haley's schedule was a logistical nightmare. I had to coordinate a complex web of city buses and expensive ride shares to get her to school and work. We have to be precise. I told her one morning, handing her a schedule I had color-coded, "If you miss the 3:15 bus, you miss the transfer at 4th Street, and I can't leave work to get you." "I know, Mom," she said. She looked exhausted. Dark circles were forming under her eyes. She wasn't a teenager anymore. She was a logistics manager in training. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I opened the mail to find a bill from the urgent care clinic where I had gone for a severe sinus infection 2 months prior. My insurance had denied the claim, citing an out-of-network lab fee, $340. It wasn't a fortune. To some people, it was a dinner out. To me, it was the grocery budget for 2 weeks. It was almost exactly the amount of the car payment for the ghost Civic. I sat on the floor of my living room, the bill in my hand, and I just cracked. I didn't cry. Crying felt too productive. I just shook. I felt the walls of the duplex closing in, the weight of the debt, the unfairness of Ryan playing the victim while I drowned in the consequences of his actions. Then the phone rang. It was Mrs. Gable, my parents' neighbor. "Chloe?" Her voice was high and tight. "You need to come. It is your dad." The world stopped. What happened? I saw him in the kitchen window. Mrs. Gable said, "He just crumpled." I called 911. "The ambulance is leaving now." I beat the ambulance to Ridgeview General by running red lights I couldn't afford to pay for. When I burst into the emergency room, Linda was already there. She was standing by the nurse's station, looking small and terrified. When she saw me, her face hardened, but the fire wasn't there. She just looked tired. "He is in room 4, she said. I rushed past her. Mark was lying on a gurney, hooked up to monitors. His face was gray, the skin looking like papery parchment. His eyes were open, but they looked foggy. "Dad?" I grabbed his hand. "Chloe," he rasped. His speech was thick, slurred on the left side. It was a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. The doctor explained it to me in the hallway 10 minutes later. "It is a warning shot." The doctor said, looking at Mark's chart, "His blood pressure is through the roof. The stress is killing him. Ms. Thompson, if he doesn't reduce his load, the next one won't be mini." I went back into the room. Linda was sitting in the chair in the corner. staring at the floor. I sat on the edge of the bed. "You have to slow down." "Dad," I whispered. Mark looked at me. His eyes were clearer now, filled with a frantic, desperate intensity. "I can't," he whispered. "Not yet. Dad, stop. The legal stuff can wait." "It can't wait," he said, his voice rising, cracking with panic. "I could have died in that kitchen. Chloe." I felt the darkness coming, and all I could think was that I haven't fixed it yet. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "If I die, Linda will give him everything," Mark said. "She will undo the trust. She will give him the house. She will give him the insurance, and you and Haley will be left with nothing but my mistakes." I looked at Linda in the corner. She didn't deny it. She didn't look up. She just twisted a tissue in her hands, over and over. "I have to finish it," Mark said, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. "I have to lock it down. Promise me. Promise me you will get Erica." "I promise," I said. 2 days later, Mark was discharged. He didn't go home to rest. He demanded we go to Erica Keller's office. He looked frail sitting in the leather chair, leaning heavily on a cane he now needed for balance. But his mind was razor sharp. "I want the house and the trust now." Mark told Erica, "Not upon my death. Now. Transfer the deed today." Erica looked concerned. "Mark, that is a significant step. It means you lose direct ownership. You will be a tenant in your own trust. Do it," Mark said. "And I want a poison pill." "A what?" I asked. "A no-contest clause with teeth." Erica interpreted. "Exactly," Mark said. "I want a clause that says if Ryan, or anyone acting on his behalf, attempts to legally challenge the validity of the trust, or claims I was mentally incompetent, the trust is automatically triggered to liquidate assets to fight him. And more than that, any funds that might have been discretionary for his rehabilitation get permanently redirected to pay Chloe's restitution and legal fees first." "He wants to sue?" Mark said, his jaw setting. "Let him pay for his own defense with his inheritance." Erica took notes furiously. "This is aggressive. Mark, it is ironclad, but it is aggressive. It basically says, sue us and you ensure you get zero. That is the point." Mark said. Erica put down her pen. "There is one more thing," she said. "Given the tensions, and given the fact that Ryan is campaigning against you, I suggest we try one final alternative dispute resolution before we sign the final deed." "Why?" I asked. "Why talk to him?" "Because," Erica said, looking at me, "if we blindside him with this deed transfer, he might do something desperate. He might harass you. He might damage the property. I want to bring him to the table. A formal mediation." "Mediation?" Mark asked. "We sit down," Erica explained. "We lay out the reality. We offer him a path, a strict path, but a path. If he refuses, then we sign the deed, and we can tell the judge we tried everything. It strengthens our position against any future claims of undue influence." Mark sighed. He looked exhausted. "Okay," he said. "One last time. Get him in a room." The mediation was scheduled for the following Wednesday at the Ridgeview Conflict Resolution Center. In the days leading up to it, Ryan went quiet on social media. I thought maybe he was reflecting. I was naive. On Monday night, my phone rang. It was Ryan. I hesitated, then picked up. "Hello?" "Hey, Chloe?" His voice was soft, broken. It sounded like the old Ryan, the little brother who used to scrape his knees and come to me for a bandage. "What do you want?" "Ryan? I am scared. Chloe," he sniffled. "I am sitting here in this dump, and I don't know how I got here. Mom says Dad is sick. Is he okay? He had a mini stroke." "Ryan," I said, my guard lowering slightly, "because of the stress, because of you." "I know," Ryan said. "I know I messed up. But why are you guys doing this to me? Why are you trying to destroy me? I am your brother. He wasn't destroying you." "Ryan," I said, feeling the anger flare up again. "He is protecting us. You destroyed the car. You destroyed his trust. I just made a mistake." Ryan pleaded. Why can't we just go back to how it was? Why do you have to be so hard on me? Because you never learn, I snapped. The frustration of the last month, the buses, the bills, the lies, boiled over. You hurt people. Ryan, you hurt Haley. You need to feel it. You need consequences, or you will never stop. So you want me to suffer? Ryan asked. You and Dad, you just want to punish me? We have to protect ourselves from you. I said coldly, if that means you suffer, then yes, maybe that is what it takes. I hung up, shaking. I felt guilty for being so harsh, but I also felt justified. I didn't know he was recording. The Ridgeview Conflict Resolution Center was a beige building filled with fake plants and motivational posters about listening. We met in Conference Room B. The table was round, meant to encourage equality. It felt like a ring. I sat next to Mark and Erica. Linda sat next to Ryan. There was a mediator, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Henderson, who had a notebook and a gentle smile that I instantly distrusted. Ryan looked clean. He had shaved. He wore a sweater. He looked like a choir boy who had lost his way. Linda was holding his hand on top of the table. We are here to find a constructive path forward. Mr. Henderson began. Ryan cleared his throat. Before we start, he said, looking at the mediator with wide, innocent eyes, I just want you to know the hostile environment I am dealing with. I am trying to change. But my sister and my father, they have a vendetta. He pulled out his phone. He didn't play the full conversation we had on Monday. He played a chop shop edit. Why are you guys doing this to me? Ryan's recorded voice asked, sounding pathetic and small. You need consequences. My voice cut in, sharp and loud. You hurt people. You need to feel it. So you want me to suffer? Ryan asked. If that means you suffer. Then yes. My voice said, we have to protect ourselves from you. Ryan stopped the recording. Silence filled the room. Out of context. I sounded like a monster. I sounded like a vindictive sister enjoying her brother's pain. Linda let out a sob. See? She cried, turning to Mr. Henderson. See what she's like? He is being hunted by his own family. Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow at me. He looked disappointed. Miss Thompson, he said, the goal of mediation is resolution, not punishment. I felt the blood drain from my face. That is not, I started. He edited that. He called me crying. He baited me. Ryan shook his head sadly. I just wanted to talk. Chloe? Mark slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Mark shouted. His voice was weak, but the anger was real. Stop the games. Ryan, we know who you are. Mr. Henderson held up a hand. Please, let's lower the temperature. He looked at his notes. We have a proposal. Mr. Henderson said, a compromise. He slid a paper across the table toward me and Mark. Ryan is willing to sign a waiver of inheritance rights. Mr. Henderson said, he will agree to step away from any claim to the estate. He will agree to a structured payment plan for the restitution, $50 a month, which is what he can afford on his current wages. $50? I said, that will take 30 years to pay off the car. It is a start. Mr. Henderson said, but in exchange, he asks that you, Ms. Thompson, agree to sign a binding covenant not to pursue any additional civil collection actions beyond the court order, no garnishments, no seizing of future assets. You accept the payment plan, and you leave him alone to rebuild his life. I looked at the paper. It was a trap. If I signed this, I was agreeing to let him pay me $50 a month. I was agreeing to stop fighting. I was agreeing to peace, but $50 a month wouldn't buy Haley a car. It wouldn't pay the medical bills. It wouldn't fix the credit score. And more importantly, it let him off the hook. Again, it was the same pattern, just dressed up in legal language. He does something terrible, cries victim, and we settle for scraps to keep the noise down. I looked at Linda. She was looking at me with pleading eyes. Just sign it, her eyes said. Just end this. I looked at Mark. He looked gray. He looked like he might die right there in the chair if this continued. I felt cornered. If I said no, I was the villain. I was the one rejecting the reasonable compromise. I was the one ensuring the war continued. But if I said yes, I was betraying myself. I was betraying Haley. Ms. Thompson? Mr. Henderson asked. It seems like a fair way to heal the family divide. I looked at Ryan. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the table, hiding a smile. He knew he had won the room. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. It is not fair, I said quietly, and I am not signing it. The air left the room. Chloe! Linda gasped. I stood up. My legs were shaking. But I stood up. $50 a month is an insult, I said. And editing phone calls to make me look like the bad guy is manipulation. I am not going to sign away my right to be made whole just to make Sunday dinner comfortable again. I looked at Mark. Dad, let's go. Mark looked at me. He looked at Ryan. And then, slowly, painfully, he pushed his chair back. He stood up beside me. We are done here, Mark said. We walked out. Behind us, I heard Linda wailing and Ryan saying, See? I told you. We walked into the hallway, into the bright, harsh light of the lobby. I felt sick. I felt terrified. I knew that by walking away. I had just poured gasoline on the bridge and lit the match. But as I looked at my father, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Pride. The summons came on a Friday afternoon, delivered not by a text or a phone call, but by a courier service. It was a formal letter from Mark, CC'd to Erica Keller, inviting, or rather, instructing, us to attend a final family settlement meeting at the house on Maple Crest Lane. The language was stiff, legalistic, and entirely unlike my father. It stated clearly that attendance was mandatory for all parties: myself, Haley, Linda, and Ryan. I picked Haley up from school that afternoon. She climbed into my battered sedan, looking pale. Do we have to go? She asked. Buckling her seatbelt, I feel like I'm walking into a war zone. Mom, we have to go, I said, trying to project a confidence I did not feel. Grandpa is trying to finish this. We owe him our presence. The drive to Maple Crest Lane felt like a funeral procession. The sky was a slate gray, promising snow, and the bare trees looked like skeletal fingers scratching against the clouds. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the lineup. Ryan's rusty truck was there, parked aggressively close to the garage. Erica's sensible sedan was next to it, and there was a third car I didn't recognize, a generic white compact with a logo on the door that read Lakeside Documentation Services. We walked up the path. The house looked the same as it always had. The beige siding, the planter boxes now empty for winter, but it felt different. It felt like a stage set for a play I didn't want to watch. When we entered the living room, my stomach dropped. Mark had rearranged the furniture. The comfortable recliners were pushed against the walls. In the center of the room was a long folding table that I recognized from years of garage sales. Neatly stacked piles of documents sat at precise intervals. Sitting at the far end of the table, near the bookcase, was a woman I didn't know. She had a notary stamp and a logbook in front of her. She nodded politely but didn't speak. Linda and Ryan were already seated on one side of the table. They looked like a defense team. Linda was wearing her Sunday church clothes, her face set in a mask of rigid disapproval. She refused to look at Mark, who was standing by the window, staring out at the street. Ryan was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, looking bored and dangerous. Sit down, please, Mark said. Turning from the window, his voice was quiet but steady. Haley and I took the seats on the worn sofa, facing the folding table. Erica sat next to Mark. The air in the room was so thick with resentment you could taste it. It tasted like metallic pennies. Thank you all for coming, Mark began. We are here to sign the final paperwork regarding the estate and the trust. Before Mark could finish, Ryan cleared his throat. It was a loud, aggressive sound. Wait a second, Ryan said. He sat up, placing his hands on the table. Before we sign anything, I have something to say. Mark looked at Erica. Erica nodded slightly. Go ahead, Ryan, Mark said. Ryan stood up. He walked around the table, pacing like he was delivering a closing argument. I just want to say that this is shameful, Ryan said, looking directly at the notary. As if performing for a jury of one, I am being thrown away. I am being discarded by my own father because of an accident, a simple accident. And my sister, he turned his glare on me. My sister has poisoned the well. She has manipulated a sick old man into stealing my birthright. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small portable Bluetooth speaker. He set it on the table. I want everyone to know the truth. Ryan said, I want you to hear how cold they really are. He pressed a button on his phone. The recording began. It was the same edited clip he had played at the mediation. But louder this time, the bass reverberated in the small living room. You need consequences, my voice shouted from the speaker, distorted and harsh. You hurt people. You need to feel it. Then Mark's voice, spliced in from a different conversation. We have to protect ourselves from you. Then me again. If that means you suffer, then yes. Ryan let it play twice. The silence that followed was suffocating. He looked at Linda. See, Mom, he said softly. They want me to suffer. They admit it. Linda let out a small, strangled sob. She reached out and touched Ryan's arm. They are cruel, she whispered. I never thought my own family could be so cruel. I felt the heat rising in my face. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain the context. But Mark raised a hand. He didn't look angry. He looked sad, a deep, bone-weary sadness that seemed to pull his shoulders down. Is that all, Ryan? Mark asked. Yeah, that is all. Ryan sneered. Unless you want to admit you are a puppet. Mark reached into his own pocket. His hand was trembling slightly, a tremor of age and adrenaline. He pulled out his smartphone. I have a recording too, Mark said. He walked over to the speaker Ryan had placed on the table. He unplugged Ryan's phone and plugged in his own. What is this? Linda asked sharply. More lies? No, Mark said. The truth? He hit play. The sound quality was different. It was windier. There was the distinct crick pop of a beer can opening. Yeah, man, she is ridiculous. Ryan's voice boomed into the room. It wasn't the sad, victimized voice he was using now. It was the boisterous, arrogant voice of a man holding court. Bought the kid a Civic. A freaking Civic. Ryan's face went pale. He froze. She is looking down on me. The recording continued. Walking around like she is better than everyone because she has a salary. Linda looked confused. She looked from the speaker to Ryan. Then came the laugh. A cruel, dark chuckle. I ought to take it for a spin. Ryan's voice said, just to scare her a little. Teach her a lesson. Show her that cars get wrecked. People move on. Put a dent in her princess life. Haley gasped. She grabbed my hand, her grip tight. But aren't you worried about your dad? The other voice on the tape asked. You are not supposed to be driving. Dad? Ryan's recorded voice laughed again. Dad won't do anything. He never does. I could drive it into a lake and he would write me a check. What are they going to do? Disown me? The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than before. It wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated. Ryan stood there, his mouth slightly open. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the look of a trapped animal. Linda was staring at the speaker. Her hand had fallen away from Ryan's arm. You said, she whispered, you said it was an accident. You said the road was slick. Mark unplugged his phone. He knew he wasn't supposed to drive. Mark said quietly, he did it to hurt them. Linda, he did it to teach his niece a lesson. That is a lie, Ryan shouted, his voice cracking. That is taken out of context. I was just blowing off steam. I was drunk. Mark ignored him. He turned to the table and picked up a single sheet of paper. I have one more thing, Mark said. He held the paper up. This is a statement I filed with the Lakeside County Court this morning. Mark said, It is a sworn affidavit. He looked at me, then at Haley. In it, I admit to my role in the hit-and-run accident involving Ryan Thompson 12 years ago. Mark said, I admit to paying off the Miller family to suppress charges. I admit to obstructing justice. Linda gasped. Mark, you can't. You will go to jail. The statute of limitations has passed, Erica said calmly from her seat. He cannot be charged, but the admission is on the public record now. Why? Ryan whispered. Why would you do that? Because I needed to understand why you are the way you are, Mark said, looking at his son. And I realized it is because I never let you fall. I covered for you. I protected you. And my protection turned you into a man who laughs about wrecking his niece's car. Mark placed the paper on the table. I am taking the shame back. Ryan, Mark said, it is mine now. You don't have to hide behind it, and I don't have to lie about it. He sat down at the table. He signaled to the notary. Let's sign. Erica slid a thick stack of documents in front of Mark. This is the deed transfer and the trust formation, Erica announced formally. This transfers the property at 104 Maple Crest Lane into the Haley Thompson Educational and Security Trust. She looked at Ryan. The terms are explicit. Ryan Thompson is disinherited from the real estate. However, she paused, there is a rehabilitation clause. If Ryan maintains verifiable employment for 2 years and completes a court-ordered substance abuse program, the trust is authorized to pay his restitution to Chloe Thompson directly. We will pay his debt, so he doesn't have to, but he never gets the cash. It goes straight to the victim. It was a brilliant, brutal stroke. It offered him a way out of debt, but it required him to be the one thing he hated, accountable. Mark picked up the pen. His hand was shaking, but he didn't hesitate. He signed the first page, then the second, then the third. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the room. Ryan watched the pen move. His face turned a deep, mottled red. You are choosing her. Ryan spat. Mark didn't look up. I am choosing the future. You are choosing your granddaughter over your own son, Ryan screamed. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the notary jump. You are stealing my house. That is my house. I grew up there. It is not your house, Mark said, signing the final page. It was never your house. It was my house. And now, he capped the pen. Now it is Haley's. Ryan looked at Linda. Mom, do something. Stop him. He is crazy. Linda looked at Mark. She looked at the man she had been married to for 40 years. She saw the new lines on his face, the frailty, but also the steel. And then she looked at Ryan, the son she had coddled, the son whose voice she had just heard laughing about destroying her granddaughter's happiness. She looked torn in half. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Fine, Ryan yelled. Keep your stupid house. I don't want it. I don't want anything from you people. You are dead to me. He spun around and stormed toward the front door. Thieves, he shouted as he grabbed the handle. You are all thieves. He threw the door open and stopped. 2 uniformed officers from the Lakeside County Sheriff's Department were standing on the porch. Ryan Thompson? One of them asked. Ryan stepped back, stumbling slightly. What? What is this? We have service for you. Son, the officer said. He handed Ryan a thick packet of papers, order of garnishment from the civil judgment. Since you are employed at the diner now, we are serving notice that 25% of your wages will be withheld starting this pay period to satisfy the restitution order for Miss Chloe Thompson. Ryan stared at the papers. He looked back into the house. He looked at Mark. You did this? Ryan whispered. Mark stood up. He looked incredibly small, but he stood straight. The court did it. Mark said, I just made sure they knew where to find you. Ryan crumbled the papers in his hand. He looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. I hope you rot, he hissed. He pushed past the officers and ran down the driveway to his truck. We heard the engine roar to life, the familiar sound of a dying muffler, and then he was gone. The officers nodded to Mark and turned to leave. In the living room, Linda stood up. She was trembling. She looked at Mark, Then at the open door where her son had just vanished. "He has no one," Linda whispered. "He has us," Mark said gently. "If he chooses to come back and do the work, he is my son," Linda said. She sounded like she was in a trance. "He is alone. He is hurt." She grabbed her purse. "Linda," Mark said, "don't. If you go, I have to," she said. She looked at me, and her eyes were empty. "You won. Chloe, you got the house. You got the money. I hope it keeps you warm." She walked out the door. She didn't look back. She got into her sedan, backed out of the driveway, and followed the direction of Ryan's truck. The room was silent again. The notary was packing up her stamp. Looking uncomfortable, Erica was organizing the signed files. Haley was crying. She wasn't sobbing. She was just letting tears roll down her face. "We broke it," she whispered. "We really broke it. I put my arm around her. It was already broken. Hales, we just stopped pretending it wasn't." Mark sat back down on the sofa. He put his head in his hands. For a long time, no one moved. An hour later, the notary and Erica had left. The house was quiet. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the living room that now belonged, legally, to a trust. Mark walked out onto the front porch. I followed him. Haley stayed inside, curling up on the sofa with her phone. The evening air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Mark leaned against the railing. He looked older than I had ever seen him. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. "Here," he said. He handed it to me. "What is this?" "Open it." I opened the flap. Inside was a cashier's check. $8,000. "Dad?" I looked at him. Where did this come from? Mark looked out at the street. "I have been fixing lawnmowers and snowblowers at the hardware store on weekends for 5 years. He said, "Just side work. Cash jobs. Your mother didn't know. I was saving it. I thought, I don't know what I thought. Maybe for a boat. Maybe for a trip we would never take." He gestured to the check. "It is not 15,000, he said. "It is not enough for another Civic, but it is enough for something safer, something yours, something he can't touch." I looked at the check. It was more money than I had seen in one place in years. It was freedom. It was a new start. But I felt the weight of the house keys in my other pocket. I felt the absence of my mother. I felt the echo of Ryan's voice screaming thief. I looked at my father. "Did we do the right thing?" I asked. My voice trembled. "We lost them. Dad, we lost Mom." Mark watched a car drive past, its headlights cutting through the gloom. He took a deep breath, and when he exhaled, it looked like a ghost escaping his lips. "I don't know. Chloe," he said softly. "I really don't know." He turned to look at me, and he offered a small, sad smile. "I just know we finally did something honest. Thank you so much for listening to My Brother Smashed My Daughter's $15,000 Civic. What my dad did next shocked everyone. It has been a journey through the messy, painful, and necessary world of family justice. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of drama, betrayal, and the long road to redemption. Don't forget to share your thoughts on Mark's decision in the comments. Did he do the right thing? Let's talk about it.